Brothers, welcome back to another episode of the Rising Kings pod. Super excited today. I've got a very special guest to come on board here by the name Ryan, 27-year-old who's out there crushing it in the personal development world, but helping people unlock traumas that hold them back from being their greatest, and helping them understand more about their purpose and why they're here and what they're to do. And it just... I'm super excited to be able to have this conversation. So I won't take up further time, man. I'd love to introduce you, man. Welcome to the show, Ryan.
Thanks, brother. I'm super grateful to be here. And as we were saying before, really excited to just open into this and see where it goes. Yeah.
Awesome, man. So can you just give the listeners just a quick, 60 second overview? Like, who's Ryan, man? What are you here? What are you doing?
Yeah. So, basically, what I've created now is a global personal development company where I work with men mostly, but men and women all over the world, really helping them awaken their deepest potential, step into their power, heal what's keeping them from actually going out there and creating the life that they want, and being the partners, being the leaders for, first of all, themselves, but for the people around them, and really showing up in the world. But where it first began, back when I dropped out of school when I was 17, as soon as I got my license, I was out of there. I started on the job site as a carpenter. The future was to become a builder, successful builder. And that's how I thought I was going to create, success and impact in my life, because that's what my dad did. So I just followed in his footsteps, and, wanted to, that was the beginning of me setting out to prove myself to dad, and of the father wound. And I went out there and became a carpenter, and I was really good at using my pain as a motivator. So I got really good at it. And by the age of 21, I was managing multi-million-dollar architecturally designed homes for a company. I wasn't even on the tools anymore. And I was telling 50-year-olds how to do their job, and it was quite difficult.
I could imagine, man.
Yeah, I got a lot
the
of
young punk, the 21-year-old coming in and telling 50-year-olds how to roll. I love it.
Yeah, that was interesting. So then I left that, went out and did my own thing and built a successful carpentry business on my own. So I was in business quite early, and that did really well. I was making pretty good money. Some weeks up to $15,000 as a 21-year-old. In that industry, it was quite incredible at the time. Then I left that. Long story short, I went down quite a depressive road, because I was living a life that was so unaligned and incongruent with who I really am. And I went after what I actually always wanted to be doing, but told that there's no money in that thing, so you shouldn't do it. And I ignored what my heart wanted for so long. And I decided to actually go after that. And that was actually working with looking back now, it's like legit just wanting to help people. But back then it was wanting to work with athletes in the gym. So became a personal trainer, worked with high level athletes and business owners in the gym. That was my business for about 5 years. And then I transitioned into, and I knew that was a stepping stone to where I am today and what I'm really now starting to create in the world. But I found a deep passion through my own healing journey over the last 8 years in this personal development world. Really deep, profound purpose in helping men really awaken their deepest selves and stepping into their power as men, healing themselves and awakening the healthy masculine energy. And that's what I do now. I work with men all over the world now, and I've built a multi-six-figure company where the number is a direct reflection of the impact, as you would know.
Yeah.
So it's, and the reason I share that the success the company's had within only not even 2 years is because of this is what happens when we live aligned to what we're actually supposed to be doing in life. When we're living aligned, things flow, and there's not as much. It's not as hard as it should be. So that's in a nutshell. That's how I've gotten to where I am today. Yeah.
I love it, man. What is the problem that we're facing as men? Like, what is this challenge? Like, why are we so stubborn to just stick to the path we think we have to in terms of like business, making money, work, even though it's like eating at our soul? I'm just curious, like through your work, like for you to be able to pick that up at such a young age, man, I think it's quite rare. Like I'm 45. At 21, I definitely wasn't thinking about changing the world and changing people's lives, man. I was just trying to sort my own life out. But I'm just curious, like through your work, like what do you feel as like some of the major challenges we as men are facing when we just can't get aligned with, a higher, better purpose?
Yeah. Look, I believe it all starts from little boy or the little girl, right? Um, for me, where that drive came, why I was 21 years old trying to prove myself and create this life was me not proving to myself or the world, but proving to my dad that I was worthy enough for his love. And how that looked was from the age of 7 years old, I had no school holidays. School holidays, I was in the truck with dad and I was working on trucks with him. He was a hydraulic hose fitter. He moved here from Africa and built a successful company in the hydraulic space. And the only way I got to spend time with him was to go to work with him. And as a 7-year-old, like that's, to get dad's approval was I have to work really, really hard. And I have to prove myself that way. And I know for a lot of men that it shows up in sport as well. The sport that they played as a kid. And for me, rugby was my thing, right? I was playing rugby and my dream was to become a professional rugby athlete. And I remember specifically there were some games where if I wasn't playing good enough, dad would leave and I would see his truck driving off in the distance.
Wow.
And as a little 7-year-old, like that was pretty hard. That was pretty heavy to see. And that drive that I had for so long was to prove to him that I was worthy enough of his approval. And this is what most men a lot of men are actually seeking in the world when they never actually receive it as a little boy. And until they recognize that they're not going to get that from him, if they didn't get it from him, they need to create it for themselves. Right. So my rite of passage, right, at first for me to become a man was to prove to dad that I could do it, that I was this worthy, successful tradie, right, in the industry as a tradie, because he was a tradie as well, that I could do it, I could prove it to it. And I did prove that to him, but I became extremely unfulfilled in the process. And with that level of unfulfillment, I was living a life that was incongruent. I didn't actually want to be a tradie. That's not actually what my heart wanted, but we will do anything for love, to be loved and accepted. We will do fucking anything. And that's exactly what I did. And, I went against what my heart wanted for so long. And I never actually learned how to listen to it. And when we live out of integrity with our heart, it develops quite a deep internal conflict, quite a deep frustration with self, and we lose a lot of self-respect. So a lot of men that feel like they need to be more disciplined, right? And they wonder why, they're working so hard to become more disciplined, but their whole life they've actually lost self-respect and self-trust because they haven't been living in alignment with their heart. Like when we focus more on that, I see men start to really develop more self-respect and discipline within their life.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
When you say aligned with the heart, like what does that look like? So, if we're thinking, am I aligned with my heart and my right intentions? How do we know if we're actually doing that?
Great question. I wasn't able to listen to my heart. I didn't even know what that meant until I was able to get quiet enough to actually listen. Now, what this means is for men to actually get out of the head into the body. And For the masculine, the masculine is very much in the head, in the doing, the thinking, analytical mind, getting shit done, to-do lists, all of these things. That's very masculine. Getting more into the heart was me getting more in touch with my emotions, my feminine body, recognizing that as both men and women, we both have masculine and feminine energy. And it was bringing the balance of both of them in. And how I did that was getting out of my head and into my body. And there's so many different ways we can do that, but my tool that I use is breath work. But through the power of the breath, it's calming and relaxing the analytical thinking mind, slowing it down so we can get out of this survival, right? The brain was only mostly created for survival, to keep us fed and alive, not happy and successful. That's what it was designed for, right? So it's getting out of that into the body. And once we can get into the body, we create enough stillness to be able to listen to our inner knowing. And most people have experienced that inner knowing at some stage in their life. Whether it was just like this pull or just this thought, hey, I should just go and do this thing. They go and do this thing, and it just like opens up all of these doors in their life. It's like, that's like listening to that inner guidance, inner knowing, being able to calm the mind that's just trying to keep you alive. And most of the time when we're living in our head, it's from a place of fear and survival. So the more that I've been able to get out of that and into my body, I actually was able to start to listen to what my heart wanted. And what this looked like was me working so freaking hard on the job site, trying to make ends meet each week, and everything was a grind. I was living in a state of survival. Even though I was making lots of money, I was also spending lots of money because I was deeply unfulfilled. And it took for me to remove myself from my environment. And what I call, when you're a pickle in the pickle jar, you can't see the label. So when you get out of the jar, you can look at the jar and go, holy shit, okay. And when we create enough stillness, we remove ourselves from our environment, we can then see what we've created. And this is what I did. So to answer your question, it's creating enough stillness to actually what's happening within the body.
Love it, man. I'm glad you said that. I've actually had some pretty profound awakenings through breath work. I remember when I was first introduced to it, it tapped me into a much deeper emotional state that I could get to just, through normal day-to-day life. Prior to that, the way I would tap into my emotional self would just be to hammer myself physically, like doing, 36, 48-hour challenges where you're not fed, you don't get any sleep, and you do summons some deeper inner stuff. But then I'm like, bro, as I'm getting older, I'm like, I don't know how many more of these things I can sustain before I break, before I can get into the emotional state. And then I came across breath work, and that was introduced to me probably about 3 or 4 years ago, and I fell in love with it. And I think you're exactly right. It's we as men, and I use men because that's who we work with, but just really being able to trust that intuition, I think is a big challenge, because a lot of the time we can hear the intuition, it can tell us the answers. There's almost like a part of us that knows it's the truth, but then that logical mind, like you said, just kicks in, and it freaks us out, and we get afraid, and then it's so against what we've been doing for so long that we kind of pretend like we didn't hear it, and we try and follow that logic path only to continually, I think you continually just get the lesson. Like it's just going to keep tapping you on the shoulder. It'll slowly slap you across the face, and then one day it'll probably punch you in the face. and then you have your epiphany. I'm curious, man, like as you went on this journey, how did you learn to just trust the process, man? Like trust yourself. It's like I was saying there before, it can get very scary, especially when things aren't going to what we desire, which is the plan. if money's not sort of happening, I'm sure even starting your business, in the coaching realm, etc., I'm sure there would have been like trials and tribulations that happened early on. How did you surrender to that, man? Like what did you do to just back yourself as you went through it?
Yeah, great question. And something I always come back to is environment. You know, the people that I surround myself with is like one of my highest priorities in life. And I'm so intentional about the men that I have around me. I have like an inner circle of brothers around me that we actually catch up. We have our call after this, actually. We have a weekly Zoom.
Awesome.
It's legit like nights at the round table. And we equally, and it's having the people around you that can equally support and challenge you. People who are living the life that you actually want to live, who have been there, who have done the things, who equally want to support and challenge you, right? So being around these kinds of people has been a catalyst to my growth. And I can 100% guarantee and say that if I didn't have the people that I have around me and have had around me on my journey, I wouldn't be where I am today. I probably wouldn't have made it this far. I would have made it somewhere, but probably not where I am today. That's been massive. But the biggest shift I think really happened within the last year, especially, was really awakening a really deep level of self-trust and inner knowing that I know that whatever environment you put me in, I know that I'll figure it out. I'll make it happen. And having that level of self-belief and self-trust that you can make it work, for me personally, has only been able to come from me going back and healing the little 5-year-old boy who didn't think he was good enough to be loved, or worthy enough to be loved. And that shows up in business and career, and especially relationships. That's
awesome. Talk me through that. Like I've done a little bit of inner child healing before, not obviously not super deep, and I do believe it gave me some pretty big shifts in my world. We're similar upbringings. Like a lot of pressure on me. Or whether my father had that on me or not, like that was the perception I had. Like to be the best. To get the ducks of the trial. The HSC, to go to uni, graduate with honors and all this sort of stuff to prove that I was worthy. And it took quite a bit of work to make amends with my father, to empathize and understand where he was coming from, and that while I may not have seen it as love, it was his level of love that he could give to me at that time. And when I made that shift, man, like my relationship with my father just skyrocketed. It was just, I just love unconditionally towards him. What I'd love to understand, man, is this childhood traumas that a lot of us, and myself included here, are still hanging on to. How does it show up? Like how do we know that we've got past traumas that are slowing us down or hindering us from being able to evolve into our highest, best self?
Yeah. There's a lot of different ways we could go with this, like hundreds of different ways. But, I think one of the greatest thing or ways to open into this, especially for men, is, I would say, I'm not sure about you. I know you work with a lot of men. I'm not sure about you, but I would say 95% of the men that I've worked with have come to me after a relationship breakdown, or going through relationship struggles or problems. And I like to say, like, life is not a window, but a mirror. It is always reflecting back to us what's happening within. Now, recognizing that I'm just going to use 5 for the sake of it. Could have happened earlier, could have happened a little bit later. But when the little 5-year-old boy didn't receive the love that he needed, and knowing back then as children, we're very egocentric, and we need to be. The world revolves around us for our survival, right? We have to have our needs met, otherwise we die. We need people to look after us, otherwise we die. So we're actually evolved to be very, it's a narcissistic trait. The world revolves around me as a child. And when a little 5-year-old boy doesn't receive that love that he needs, or he's perceived that he's too much, for example, that this was me. I was so expressive that it was like, just be quiet. Like, you're too much. Like, I really embodied that. So I started playing small. I started really holding my true expression back and shaping myself to be a certain way. So when a little 5-year-old boy doesn't receive the love and nurturing that he needs consistently, he makes things mean things about him. We're just meaning-making machines from the youngest age. Well, obviously, if I'm not receiving this, and this means that I'm not good enough to be loved, therefore, and as I shared before, we will do anything and become anyone to be loved. So as a little 5-year-old, you then start shape-shifting yourself and becoming whoever you need to be in order to be loved and accepted and approved. This is why I didn't have school holidays. I then went and worked every single week, a lot of weekends, but all my school holidays.
Just to get the approval of your father, yeah? Like for your father to say, good job, son, thanks for helping.
Yeah, just to be around him. But the thing is with that as well is he had such high standards for me because he wanted the best for me. That he had such a high standard that I could never meet those standards. And I made that mean that no matter how hard I try, like I'm
never good enough.
It's never enough, no matter how hard I try. So what I would do was, and this came up a few years ago when I recognized my relationship with challenge. I would either not even bother because I'm like, oh, fuck it, there's no point in trying or I would try really, really, really hard and just fall short and then prove to myself, right? So when we're this little 5-year-old boy and this happens, we make some key decisions and core beliefs about ourselves. And what then begins to happen is we make these decisions, and then when we look at the spectrum of trauma, this is what we call I can't say the word. I can't even say the word.
Developmental.
Developmental trauma. There we go. Wow, that's a tongue twister. We develop this, right, as a little boy, and how this plays out is not receiving this love and this inconsistent nurturing. It's traumatizing. It's like this is what's going on. It's confusing, and from the youngest age, little boy steps away from who he truly is and becomes someone who he's not. The highest form of disrespecting yourself is stepping away from who you actually are to become someone who you're not. And then what happens with the egoic mind is we will then go throughout our life and find evidence to prove and reaffirm back to us what we believe to be true about ourselves. Because we'll do everything in our power to stay in alignment with our identity and how we actually see ourselves. So then we go through life and we have this whole life's worth of evidence to prove to us all of these beliefs that we created about ourselves, all of these core decisions that we made as a little 5-year-old, along with the unexpressed and unfelt emotions and sadness and grief that comes with that. And we carry that through our entire life that then shapes us into who we are today. And living from our current state, living in your current circumstances, making decisions from who you are is then repeating the past. So the future is going to look very much the same as the past. Just keep repeating the same shit over and over and over, keep repeating the same patterns in relationships and wondering why nothing's changing.
Got it. So when you say it plays out in relationships with the men that you work with, are we talking like in marriage, like arguments, disconnect, can't open up, not showing emotion? What are some of the, I guess, things that we should be looking out for if there's listeners right now that might be, challenged in their relationships. Maybe it's with their kids, maybe it's with their chosen one or their partner, etc. Like what are some sort of the symptoms that show up when we have this trauma that's sitting inside?
Yeah. One of the biggest, and I'll speak to one of the probably the most common ones, is the abandonment wound. And this very much comes from the mother. It's a mother wound, the abandonment wound. When a little boy doesn't receive that consistent love and nurturing from his mother, he then deems himself unworthy for love. And how this shows up in relationships is he might say things like, no matter how hard I try, I just can't keep her happy. No matter how hard I try, she's just, the happy wife. This is the nice guy, right? The mentality of the nice guy that allows people to just walk over him, who will drop anything at any time for anyone at the expense of himself, who lacks true self-respect for himself. This is the man who feels like he needs to become this person that people think they want him to be, right? This is the person who feels like he needs to become this because he doesn't, from the youngest age, from a little 5-year-old, who I am is not good enough to be loved, so I must become someone else. And how that shows up in relationships is very much men feeling this need to become someone else, stepping away from who they truly are, self-abandoning what they actually need, not feeling that who they actually are, their full expression of their deepest selves is just good enough to be loved just as it is. And this causes all sorts of problems around women not feeling that the true leadership, because this man struggles to really stand for something. He doesn't feel worthy enough of really living from his deepest truth, which is living from his heart, in the potential of love abandoning him.
Got it. So is that I've dealt with this not in my own relationships, but men that I've worked with in the past, like this notion of high levels of resentment. Like exactly what you said there before. It doesn't matter how much I do in my relationship, she never sees me, she never appreciates me, all those sorts of things. And then they kind of go into a bit of a shell. And what I mean by that is, they, like you said, don't stand up for themselves. They don't hold themselves grounded. They do everything they can to try and keep it calm and not argue and not fight and not have any confrontation on the family front, on the home front. But then it just builds up, turns into, like gambling addictions, alcohol addictions, porn addictions. And eventually it does just create a separation, whereas the wife, the feminine, has just wanted a man to just step up, acknowledge, take ownership, and just be, like you said, man, just be his true, authentic self, which when you're your true, authentic self, I do believe it comes with love. Like it comes with love. It's not the egotistical self that's like, oh, I'm going to push the wife and the kids to the side so I can follow my dreams. Like it's always, standing strong, standing powerful to support the wife and the family unit. Do you find that that's kind of like a very common symptom, like this notion of resentment?
Yeah, absolutely. Like the energy's got to go somewhere, and think of it like a damn wall, like building up over time. And what'll happen is, and this is the scary truth about what happens when a man is scared to be alone, right? Is that he first of all will get into a relationship based on a fear of loneliness than actually being in love, right? So he will be in a relationship based on this person's not going to abandon me, not based on I love this person unconditionally just for who they are, knowing that they can go and do and be whoever they want and it doesn't affect how I feel about myself. Because what happens is when we fear being alone, we fear this abandonment. And for example, like a little 5-year-old that doesn't get that loving nurturing that he needs, he's abandoned by love. That's a form of emotional abandonment over time. So a man then seeks that in relationship. He seeks love in a relationship, and then he attaches himself. And when you're attached to something, you are fearful of it changing in any sort of way. You're fearful of that attachment leaving you because your self-worth is so tied to that attachment. And whatever that attachment does, it then affects how you feel about yourself. And by this happening, men would rather step back, become reserved, keep the wife happy, than actually stand for their fucking truth in potential for her leaving. Because if she leaves, then they have to face the very thing that they're most fearful of, which is the fear of being abandoned. But here's the thing. Over time, they are pushing their partner away by not being who they truly are. And they actually create the very thing that they're most fearful of. And it's like it's quite ironic because then their partner leaves them and then they're faced with the very thing. So this is like, you either go back and feel the trauma that's there, or you wait for it to show up and then feel it when you're faced, and you have no other option but to feel it. And this is the power of going back and what we're speaking about here is the mother wound. For example, the man that you just suggested then around, feeling this resentment towards his partner and either becoming really passive aggressive, really needy, or just fully becoming numb.
Yeah.
Reserved from his emotions, stepping back and just becoming this really nice guy that's just walked over. It's going back and healing his relationship with his mother.
Can you do that even if they've passed? Like, this is stuff that you can do without having the mother or the father around, right? Like, this is internal personal work that you can do.
Yeah, absolutely. There's definitely ways, completing relationships without having to speak with the person. The most important thing here is, and the process I take my clients through is actually going back in time to the little 5-year-old, putting themselves in the shoes of what that little boy was experiencing at the time. Like, what was actually playing out for him? What was happening in his family dynamic? How were his parents relating with each other? What were they going through in that time? What did he see? What are the beliefs that he created back then? Like, looking at who you are now, going back then and seeing, you go, wow, you see it from a whole different perspective.
Yeah. Yeah, it's powerful.
And the thing is, right, there's not this, it's not like there's no separation between the little 5-year-old boy and who you are today. Because when we go back and connect to that little 5-year-old, you're connecting with the deepest part of yourself that you haven't yet acknowledged. You're not actually going back in time, traveling back in time and connecting with the 5-year-old. You might be if you're quite spiritual and you're on that plane. But you're not actually physically going back there and connecting with him. You're actually just connecting with yourself today in this moment. The parts of you, you're connecting with the parts of you that you have not yet recognized or loved within yourself. And most people have a little boy or little girl within them that they have not yet recognized, that they've shoved in the closet and locked the door. And that little inner child is just kicking and screaming, just wanting to be heard, seen, understood, and validated, appreciated, approved. And then how people seek that, instead of finding it within themselves and loving those parts within themselves, they seek it from their external world. And this is when you then need those things from your partner or from the people around you.
Got it. What are your thoughts around, guys who understand this, like maybe find themselves being, Mr. Nice Guy at home and, happy wife, happy life, trying to do that, feeling built up resentment, but then afraid to really step into their own masculinity because, like obviously there's, we're in a very different world now than what we were 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 50 years ago, 80 years ago, especially for men, and around this notion of masculinity. how do men navigate this without coming across as egotistical? Are you just becoming a disconnected man? You're not really showing up for your wife and family if you put yourself first. How have you helped men kind of navigate that space? Because I do believe a lot of men do become afraid to step into their highest power for fear of, I love what you're saying. Like, I do believe that there's fear of abandonment, i.e., well, my wife's going to leave me, but if you stay in the current state, she's going to regardless. But also too, like, fear of, like, I'm nervous of what this masculine energy is going to bring up, because we do tend to wrap it in a lens of, alpha male, red pill, angry, frustrated type of man. Do you have any advice for guys who want to take this transition, want to, understand that, if they stay doing what they're doing, it's not going to end well and it doesn't feel good? How do they kind of move into this more grounded, wholesome, loving man who can stand up for himself, who can hold standards, who can hold, a level of, strength in his relationships at home?
Yeah, incredible question. And it's, first of all, it's selfish by not becoming that. Because being the man, people are actually relying on you for them to actually depend on you. And here's the thing, most men are not in that energy, in that frame of their own energy. Therefore, they can't even depend on themselves, let alone other people depending on them, because they're actually depending on other people, potentially their partner, right? This was me for a long time. I used to find women, successful women, to lean on and depend on them, because I couldn't actually depend on myself. I couldn't trust myself to go out there and create that emotional pillar within myself. So I found women out there that could reflect that back to me and also play the role of my mother as the emotional support that I never received. So as soon as I went back there and connected with that and cultivated that within myself, I and I'll tie this all together, but going back to the little 5-year-old boy, stepping away from that, connecting with him, recognizing that there's no separation, realizing that connecting with this little 5-year-old that I neglected for most of my life cultivated a deep level of self-trust within me. Because I actually went back, I did a visualization, and this is some of the work that I do. We go back and we visualize actually speaking to this little boy, this little girl. And I asked him, I was like, what do you need right now for support? How are you feeling? How can I support you? And he said to me, I don't trust you. I don't trust that you'll be there. And that was me speaking to me today. So recognizing that, I was like, wow, okay, the self-trust that I lack is actually my little 5-year-old boy who doesn't trust me to hold him, which is me holding me. So a lot of the work I do is really cultivating that pillar of emotional support within yourself and having the right people around you, but most of all being that within yourself. And when men cultivate that frame of energy and they start connecting with their own heart, first of all, it's getting rid of the stigma and the belief of what most men have or believe that it is to be a man. Your true expression of your masculine energy is out of your head and connecting with your heart and living in alignment with it and living within integrity of your heart and being able to listen to that inner knowing that you have within and build your life around that. That's what I've done the last 5 years, has been me building my life around just my inner knowing, my integrity with my heart. And I feel that the more a man just steps into that, goes back, heals the little boy, as the quote goes, heal the boy and the man appears.
Yeah.
The more we go back and heal the boy, the man just starts automatically appearing. So it's not so much just trying to be this man that it's like, oh, I'm going to be more masculine. I'm going to be my masculine energy. No, just heal the things that are stopping you from being the fucking man that you were born to be.
And And is that around self-acceptance, self-love? Do you feel it's tapping into that level? Like when a man learns to accept and love himself, like all the good traits, or if you want to call them bad traits, all the things that maybe he's been afraid of, but when he's accepting of that and loving of that, then he does start to, I guess, reconnect with that inner child to go like, there's nothing wrong with you, man. Like you are worthy. You are a good man. Like all the things that you've been doing is great. It's instead of the resistance and the anger and the frustration, it's all sitting there. Once you're willing to be open enough to accept and love oneself.
It's the highest form of self-love and acceptance, is actually accepting yourself. And if you think of it this way, like it's going back and accepting the person that you decided to be as well. And everything that's played out based on you doing the best with what you knew at the time. And then your life actually being based off that, actually, like moving forward. But if you think of it like this, I read something the other day where it takes 400,000 ancestors for you to be here today, for you to be born. So in your lineage, in your family lineage, it takes 400,000 people for you to be here. And the fact that you were born, one in 400 trillion chance of you being born and that you're here, says that you're enough. You're enough. Yes, as it is. So a little 5-year-old is more than worthy. And they are. You look at a kid, they are fully out there. They're an expression of, they will say whatever they want, right? And who were you before you were taught to be a certain way, before you were conditioned and put into a box? Who was that little boy or little girl? Going back and connecting with that, and then accepting who you decided to be, and really gaining a better, wider perspective as to what was going on and why you decided to be that way, right? And then you'll see the thread. Once you go back and do that, you'll see the thread, how that's played out your whole life until today. And accepting all of that, the good and the bad, I think that's the highest form of self-love and acceptance.
Yeah, I love that, man. Because it's such important work. Like when I think about, where I'm at in my life. Now, I'm not as blessed as you to be 27 with a beautiful beard and all the good looks, man. I'm 45 with 2 kids. But one of the biggest things that I think is so important for men to do, and why they should be doing this work, is not to pass this intergenerational trauma on. Because if I hadn't dealt with, and if I don't continue to deal with my inner work, the stuff that needs to happen, I'm just going to pass that on to my son and my daughter. And then they'll be having this conversation in 20 years' time, feeling the same way, feeling all the pain, all the trauma. My father didn't this, my father didn't love me here, like da-da-da. And so it's just, what I'm getting at here, man, is like the work you're doing is just so important. And I think more men need to tap into it, not just for themselves, but especially as fathers. I think we take on a role as a father when we choose to have children that, the mother gets a lot of support and information and education on how to carry a child, what to eat, what not to eat, how to calm birth, all that sort of stuff. Whereas, the man kind of sits on the sideline, just like, oh man, I'm just going to be a dad. And I see so many fathers that are doing the best they can with what they have, but they're not aware and awakened to this level. And I can just see this cycle just continually happening and going around and around and around. And as we head into more challenging environments and territory with, everything on demand and videos and screens and all that sort of stuff, man, like I can't think of a more prevalent and important time for men to start this journey. With that being said, man, like what is the starting point for men? Like, there's a guy out there who's listening to this right now. life's pretty good. He might yell at the kids occasionally. He's probably a little bit disconnected with his wife, but it's like, it's just middle-aged man. Like, that's just how it is. What's your advice to them, man? Like, what's a starting step? How can a man just start the process of tuning in and tapping into himself to start thinking beyond and bigger than getting up, going to work tomorrow and just dealing with the responsibilities of life, to going, hey man, you're playing a very important role here in this world. What's your advice, man? What's the first starting point?
Yeah, this is so important because so many people really are living a 7 out of 10 life, very mediocre life, and it's very easy to have that in Australia. Like the middle class here in Australia, like you can live a pretty comfortable life, and with that, it's very easy to distract yourself from feeling your deepest emotions, your deepest pain. And how men can really shift this is, first of all, someone that's like listening to this and they're in that stage, like, yeah, like, things are good. Could be a little bit better, but yeah, we're getting through. Take a really good, hard, honest look at yourself by creating a vision. Getting really, really clear on if you were to be or become or do anything, like what would you create? What do you want to actually leave behind for your family? Do you want your family to work for the rest of their life? Do you want them to not have time with mum and dad? Do you want them to not be able to experience traveling the world together as a family, or having a big, beautiful home where, they have space to be and explore and right? Get really, really clear on what it is that you want and what it is that you like, the legacy that you're leaving behind for your family. And you'll be leaving behind something. And a lot of them are leaving behind, undealt with trauma. Right. I tell you right now, when you say the generational, I know for a fact that I am the break in generational trauma, in the lineage of trauma in my family. My last separation that I went through played out exactly how my parents separated. And I was faced with all of the pain, all of the struggles that my dad experienced and that he experienced in all of his previous relationships as well, right? That anxiousness, that fear of abandonment was passed down from him to me based on how he showed up for me as a dad. And the next thing is getting around different kinds of men, getting around men who actually inspire you and just starting to spend some more time with them, or going to events, or, listening to more stuff like this and starting to, if someone's listening to this, I can almost guarantee you, they don't just want a 7 out of 10 life. They want to better them. Yeah. And if you're listening to this and you're wanting to better yourself, it's, be real and honest with yourself. Things aren't as good as you say they are.
I'm so glad you said that, man, because the pod listeners, they hear me banging on about it all the time, bro. They're like, it's inner work, man. Like, you can chase the external highs, and there's nothing wrong with that, but it's not going to bring you the 9 out of 10 feelings and desires. It's not going to make you a better father. It's not going to it's not going to fix your marriage at the end of the day. It's not going to make you feel more joyous and happy. Like, you have to go into this deeper realm, like you're talking about here, and investigating oneself and getting to understand oneself and acknowledging that there are past traumas, that there were things that didn't happen for you as a kid, and it's on you now. Like, you can't just hope and pray that it'll just disappear one day, or get hidden after enough beers, or gambling that it disappears, man. Like, it follows you around like a shadow. Brother, how can people get in touch with you, man? Like, I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation, man. I really appreciate you jumping on here and sharing your amazing insights. Love what you're doing, man. At 27 years old, I think it's phenomenal. Like, I'm always inspired by a younger generation that are coming through, that are digging into this type of work that a lot of us are really just sort of finding out about in our 40s, which is a little bit harder, man. We just carry a few more wrinkles and a little bit more baggage. How can people connect with you, man?
Yeah. Instagram, Facebook is where I'm most present. I post a lot of content every single day, so heaps of value. So at Ryan Moresby White, sure to be in the show notes.
You'll show them that, yeah.
Show notes below, but I wanted to also honor that as well. The fact that because I understand your generation, like you're almost like my dad's 55.
Yeah.
And for you to be doing what you're doing now, and the level of, I feel it would have been a lot harder for you to get into the work than it was for me and the generation coming through. So that's a huge testament to you as well.
Thanks, brother. Appreciate it, man. Well, man, really, really appreciate your time. Good to connect. Thanks for jumping on the pod today, man. Keep up the awesome work. Keep inspiring, changing lives, man, and look forward to connecting down the track, brother.
Thanks, bro. Appreciate it.
Stay strong. See you next week.